going to show up in Twitch and to make sure the sound is good. And then we'll resume the series on creating an application with Spring Data Neo4j. So let me check one thing first. So yes, I'm hearing myself, all good. So let's get started. I'm happy to see you today. Good afternoon, good evening, good night, good morning from wherever you are. My name is Florent. I work at Neo4j and I live in Paris. As you might have noticed, I decided to change the hour a little bit. So the streams I used to do were in the morning for me. Now they are in the afternoon. So it's probably a bit late for people living east of France, but it's earlier also for people west of France. So yeah, let me know if that time works better for you or worse. For me, at least, it's a bit easier to accommodate. I'm not a morning person, so streaming in the morning, that's just a double challenge for myself, which I would like, I would like to make my life easier. So going forward, unless there is strong feedback against, I'm going to continue streaming at this hour, which will allow me to have guests, for instance, like we had with the GoGame series, so the Golang Go GM for Neo4j. Eric was living in the US, so this time was more convenient for him. So that being said, let me share my screen, and before starting, diving into the code directly, I wanted to talk about a few things before we start. And as usual, if you have any questions about what I talk about during the next hour, of course, feel free to send questions, whether you are on YouTube live or on Twitch. I would be happy to try to answer them. So the first thing I wanted to talk about, hello, Jack from Twitch. And first thing I wanted to talk about is a conference called Nodes. So you might be familiar with it. It's been running for a few years now. So the next event will be on June 17. It will be online, of course, due to the circumstances. We would love to have, in-person events again, but that's not safe yet. And so we would love to see you attend. So book the day. It will be the full day on June 17. Be sure to be there. Be sure to register when you have the chance, but you should already book the date. And that's, the first aspect of what I wanted to talk about. The second one is the CFP, so the call for paper. So if you follow this link that I'm going to send in the chat right after, you will be able to get access to papercall.io, which is a call for paper application we're using, and we are more than happy to help you with the submission you want to talk about. So whether it's, sharing your experience with Neo4j or one of the Neo4j projects like Craft Data Science, Bloom, APOC, there are many subjects within Neo4j itself. So we would love to hear you talk about it. So you still have a few, and a bit less than 2 months to submit a talk, but the earlier the better, because people have more time to review what you're submitting. So it gives you a fairer chance to basically have your submission reviewed in quiet conditions instead of rushing towards the end. So I would advise you, if you really want, we would really be happy to have you submit one or several submissions about your experience of Neo4j, your projects, etc., etc. So let me post this link right here. So CFP for Nodes 2021. And here we go. So yeah, it should be posted on both YouTube and Twitch. And yes, that was the first thing I wanted to talk about before going back to the series of live stream I've been doing for 2 weeks now. I mean, it's a third episode of many episodes possibly. So let me recap for those who are joining the series for the first time. What I'm trying to do is to build a small application that helps me monitoring, in a way, the community of drivers. So when I talk about drivers in the context of Neo4j, you might think about the official drivers, right? We have Java, .NET, JavaScript, Python, Go. So the first 5 in the list on my left are the official drivers, and that's the ones Those are the ones that we officially support. But actually, as you can see in that list, we have also more drivers which are actually maintained. And the 5 official drivers, so .NET, Java, JavaScript, Go, and Python, are using the BOLD protocol, so binary protocol over TCP. They are using that, but we have in the community we have others. I've just picked a few. There are of course a lot more. Like we have, so in a Neo4j RB, there is a Ruby driver wrapper that wraps 2 different drivers depending on your needs. So that's for the Ruby community. There are a few others, like there is Neo4r, which is using an HTTP connector, so using the HTTP APIs exposed by the Neo4j server. So for, data science, statistics, etc. We have one of the newer ones, which might be a little bit less known, for instance, is Lotus Technologies Neo4j PHP client, because you might have heard about the GraphAware PHP driver, but it is not maintained anymore, and so there is a new one that is being worked on. There are actually a few others in the PHP landscape, but that's something we are actively working on. And so that's just a few examples of what the community is doing. And it is part of my job to understand what they're doing, see how we can help, etc., etc. And I've started doing, writing down those projects here and there in a spreadsheet first, so very low tech. I know that sounds strange. I'm a developer. I should write code and to help myself. But and at some point I said, okay, come on, I work at Neo4j. I should have at least defined a graph for this. And so I wrote a very rapid, quick and dirty spreadsheet reader that reads the data and imports it into a Neo4j instance. So I have this graph currently, so you can see it's a bit messy, but let's zoom in maybe on a specific language. So if I do this, maybe for Ruby, for instance, and let's return the language. So that's something, that's based from the spreadsheet I have been manually maintaining. And you can see there is Ruby, the language. Then there are 2 projects. So one which is quite outdated now from our former colleague Max DeMarti, who used to work at Neo4j. There is the Neo4j RB stuff, which actually is based either on the Java driver or another driver that is not maintained anymore. And so you can see that's just an example of the data I've been collecting, and then I've been trying manually to structure it into a graph. But instead of keeping this manual approach, my idea, and that's how I started this series, is to build an application. So with Spring Data Neo4j and in Java in that case, to have some kind of application that helps me add data to that graph and share that graph with more people, and also maybe that application to more people. Let's say a colleague spots a new project in the wild for a new language, like for Rust, for instance. I know there are a few projects here and there experimenting with Rust and Neo4j connectivity. They could just add that, and then we would get some kind of community driver graph. So that's the end goal. So the end goal is to have an application that allows me to share and let people within Neo4j first. I mean, of course, the code will probably be open source because there is nothing critical about it, but the graph probably will be shared only internally, but you can run on your own and try a few things. And so I think that's a good excuse to dive into Spring Data Neo4j 6, which is the new major release of Spring Data. And by the way, there is a patch release going on today, I believe, unless the plans have changed. But today there should be 6.04. But I think for now we're using 6.02 or 6.03. And so I started two streams ago, because now my time unit is in terms of streams. A Spring Data Neo4j project that I downloaded from start.spring.io. And so I downloaded it. I added what I needed. I added Neo4j. I'm using test containers for the testing part, etc., etc. And I left with a failing test, which is not something I really wanted, but at least now I know where to start. But before diving into the failing test and try to fix it, again, for those who are joining only now, I'm going to give you a tour of what we have so far. So at the core, and the naming is probably not ideal, and that may change in the future if I get better ideas. And if you have any idea, by the way, for better naming of the concepts I'm trying to model here with my Spring Data Neo4j application, I'm more than happy to hear them. So let's start maybe with the core, which is the driver repository. So as you may know, in Spring Data Neo4j, and in Spring Data in general, like Spring Data JPA, Spring Data Gemfire, Couchbase, or what have you, you have this notion of repository. So repository encapsulates, so this one is a bare bone, is a bare minimum for a repository, but you have a few others in the hierarchy. So let's say you have maybe, I don't know, so there are of course reactive variants, etc. But if we want to keep it simple, we have this CRUD repository, which is specialization of that interface. When you have save, create, read, find methods, etc. And you just have to inject, you just have to define your own, but as an interface, right? So the idea is you declare what you want, and by following a naming convention or precising what kind of custom queries you want, Spring Data will be smart enough to generate the implementation that will connect to the right Neo4j instance and executing the query either based on the name of the method or based on the custom query you're giving. So for instance, you could imagine something like, and there is actually nice support in IDEs usually, so I'm using IntelliJ, but you see find by, and then it can, find by properties. And just by following this naming convention, the framework, so the Spring Data framework will be smart enough to understand what kind of query should be run and how to retrieve data from the graph. So that's the core concept of Spring Data in general, and of course there is an implementation for Neo4j. And so you might be asking, okay, so maybe you have noticed that there is a Neo4j repository even here, which is probably the most specialized one. I mean, there is a reactive variant, of course, which I'm not using, but as you can see, it has paging and sorting. Paging and sorting is, specialization of the create, read, update, delete methods with pagination and sort, as you can guess. And Neo4j sits on top of that with a few more things that has been added to it. But in my case, that's not something I usually do. But I chatted with my fellow colleagues who are maintaining Spring Data Neo4j. That is Garrett Meyer and Michael Simons. And the approach of Michael usually is to have the minimal repository, so that way you don't expose any operations you don't want to expose because the interface is empty. So that is enough to have a Spring Data repository, but by default, it doesn't do anything. So by default here, it will only do save operations. There is nothing else. And that way, there is no way someone could use another method that you didn't really intend to expose. So that's a way of doing it. You can, of course, if you rather have everything exposed by default with, all the creates, read, update, delete methods, paging, etc. If you want all of that, of course, you might be better off using Neo4j repositories or the reactive variant. But so that at the core, and at the core, you can see it's a repository of what? Of Neo4j driver, and the identification of such entities are based on UUIDs, so unique identifiers, which are not the internal IDs of the nodes in Neo4j. That's something synthetic that is generated and managed by the framework. So let's have a look. And again, when I was talking about naming, the naming is not necessarily great. So I've called that a driver. So to me, a driver is a project that allows you to connect directly to Neo4j either via HTTP or Bolt. So that's what I call a driver here. So I had to call it Neo4j driver because I didn't want it to clash with the actual Bolt driver that the Spring Data Neo4j 6 depends on. You have the UUID identification with a custom generator. I mean custom, built-in. My bad. So it comes with Spring Data Neo4j 6. By default, I believe you have two implementations: the internal ID that comes from the database, which is not safe and reliable for for external mapping, and the UUID generator. And so it has a URI, usually a GitHub URI, GitLab URI, or what have you. And what kind of what I call transport, so maybe protocol would be better. I don't know. You tell me in the chat whether the naming could be improved. Any ideas are welcome. And of course, it could support several things. Some projects, I can think of Python Neo, for instance, which is a Python project developed by the team lead in the drivers team, which is his personal project, not an official one. But it has an OGM, it supports HTTP, it supports Bolt, it has everything, basically. So in terms of transport, you have a driver transport. So that's, as you can see, a relation. So a driver supports one or more transports, hence a list. That's why it's a list. And a transport can be, so it's a relationship properties. There is no relationship entities in Spring Data Neo4j 6 anymore. The only top level entity you can have is based on the node, which is kind of matches the Cypher philosophy anyway. So that's more aligned with the data model of Neo4j. And so the supported transport can be either HTTP or Bolt. And then if it's Bolt, for instance, what versions of Bolt? That's something that's actually very important to me. Because as you might know or not, Bolt evolves from version to version. There used to be version 1 to 3, 4.0, 4.2, 4.1, 4.2, because they decided to align with this versioning scheme of Neo4j more recently. And that's quite important because depending on the Bolt version driver support, it will mean whether they support a specific version of Neo4j or not. So for instance, if you want to try Neo4j 4.2, but the Bolt driver you're using, community one driver supports only Bolt 2 or 3, then you know you will be stuck. You will have some issues for sure. So of course you don't have this risk with official drivers because they are maintained for every major version of Bolt as well. So that's not going to happen. We are doing our best, and that's a part also of my job, is to make sure we can help the community driver authors with maintaining their drivers and following the updates of the Bolt protocol. But yeah, so here you have it. You have a driver connected to transport, whether it's official or not. So in that case, we have 5 official drivers. The rest are not official. And yeah, so that's the main thing. And as you can see, all the fields except the UIDs all the fields are final because I want my entity to be as immutable as possible, which is why I do everything by constructor, which is completely supported and which is super nice. And UID, I can use what's called a wither, so a with and my property, and the framework will be able to pick up. I assume I could even do that actually. I could even do that and just, that's an improvement I could do. Just gonna leave it there, it's probably not gonna break anything. So yeah, at least everything is actually immutable. And so when there is a new value, yeah, and yeah, so yeah, I will do that afterwards. That's a good refactoring to keep in mind because then I will need to introduce another constructor. So let's do that afterwards. I don't get too much distracted, but it can be completely fully immutable with one public constructor, one private constructor, and the wither you can call the private constructor. So we're gonna do that, but first we need to test our failing test. Let's not do refactoring while we have a failing test. That's not a good idea. And what else? Yeah, and then so we have a Spring Boot application, of course, and the thing we started in the last stream was to expose an API, because then the application, of course, will have an API, so the backend will expose some kind of API to register a new driver. And there will be a front end, so I will include that in the streams. So I know it will look a little weird at some point because I'm probably gonna develop a front end application on the live stream series called Spring Data Neo4j 6. So if you think it's not a good idea, if you're only interested in Spring Data Neo4j and you really don't want to see me live stream the creation of an Angular application in that series, please let me know. And in that case, I will just focus on the Spring Data Neo4j side of things. But I think it's interesting to see the full story, right? A feature does not stop with the backend. The feature only is complete when the user can use it. So we're not going to ask the users to use the raw APIs directly. So my idea here is to, once the API works, which is not the case because we have a failing test and we also have a few things to revise after the test is fixed, I will start with an Angular application. So why Angular? Why not React or Next.js or what have you? Because I'm comfortable. My TDD flow is well set up in Angular. I have good TDD habits there and not really with React. So I don't see myself improvising and trying to work with my TDD approach on a framework I don't know. I mean, not in a live stream. I'm happy to do that in real life, happy to learn, but not in a live stream. That would require too much preparation, which is not something I want to do. And so if we look, we started with, oh, nice. Yeah, let me clean that up. Driver API. So I'm using not only Spring Data Neo4j, oops, wrong file. Let me reopen that. But I'm also using Spring Starter Web, so the classic, the classic servlet-based Spring MVC that is brought up by the Spring Boot Starter. So because I have that, I have my REST controller, which basically takes the return result of the method and add it to the response body directly. That's why I don't have to do response body here. That's done for free with REST controller. I'm mapping on /driver, and whenever there is a post on this, the code will be executed. So one of the things I forgot to do last time was, or maybe I did it at the very last minute last time, I don't remember, is I did this add request body so that it understands that the driver is part of the payload of the request. I think by default it assumes JSON, but it will probably be cleaner to add it. So yeah, so I had the repository test, so that already worked, by the way. So yeah, maybe let's talk about the testing part and then finally get into the live coding part. I'm using test containers because it's easy to bring up a Neo4j instance, and I don't have to deal with Neo4j is a Java project, so I could use the what's called the test harness. So I don't know if you're familiar with that. But yeah, exactly. I'm trying to get a window here. Come on, browser, show me a window. Okay, maybe not. So Neo4j test harness is a way to test Neo4j that works for Java projects, and I'm in a Java project, so why not? However, when you do that, you basically end up adding all the class paths of Neo4j harness. I mean, that's okay. Very, very nice referencing. It's a very old thing, so outdated result here. Cool. Yeah, actually, there is an excellent blog post from Michael Simons. So I invite you to have a look for all the approaches that you can use. And test harness is one of them, but what I don't like about test harness is that basically you end up with possible conflicts between your own dependencies and the dependencies brought up by test harness for testing. So yeah, let me share that in the chat. So when you're not on the JVM, so it's not the case here because it's on the JVM, but when you're not, of course, you don't have a choice. Docker is probably the best way to go. So yeah, here you go. I just posted the blog post by my fellow Michael Simons working on Spring Data Neo4j and explaining different approaches for Java applications. And so yeah, I'm using test containers. There is a nice test container module, also authored by Michael Simons, by the way, which basically does all the right things for you. Wait for the right logs for bolt, HTTP, etc., and then starts up the Neo4j container at the version you say. And then there is this very nice Spring Framework support for dynamic property source, which will configure on the fly once the container is ready. So that way my test is automatically connected to the running Neo4j instance, and then I have my test itself, which when I call the save method, the only method I have introduced so far, I want to make sure that it's actually in the database, and the way I'm doing that is using Neo4j template, just because I don't want to use the same repository for both read and writes, because reads are not part of the feature I want to develop anyway, and using the same class for doing some actions and checking that the actions are correct you could suffer from double bugs, the joint consequences of two unrelated bugs that could make you believe that it actually works when it doesn't. So instead of doing that, I'm taking an independent approach for checking the results. So one way of doing that is with Neo4j template, and Spring Data Neo4j auto configuration bits are smart enough to make sure the template is configured properly based on those properties as well. So that's why I don't have the only configuration I need for my test is just that, the URI, username, password, and then the rest will be configured properly. And so the template allows me to find all the Neo4j drivers. So I'm using the template because it's a bit closer to my Java model. I could use a raw Cypher query with a bolt driver directly as well. That's also another possibility, which are both valid in my opinion. This one is a little more concise, so I'm telling the Neo4j template to find all the entities of Neo4j drivers types. There should be only one, and it should be exactly the same as the one I saved. So And I see a question, so let me use Restream. Actually, I forgot to do that 2 other times, but I can click on Show. And the question is, can you please tell whether the best first search algorithm is implemented in Neo4j or not? So if you want to look at an interesting search algorithm, so I'm not entirely sure, but I'm pretty sure APOC has many things. So if you look at APOC, and there is also a graph algorithm as well that might be interesting. So maybe graph data science, I'm not sure. But let me go to APOC first. There might be some graph algorithms in there, except that's not the page I want. Yeah, maybe the user guide is better. Yeah, except it's there. Okay, procedures. And I mean, there are a huge list of Cypher extensions when you install APOC on your Neo4j server. And it's just one click in Neo4j desktop, by the way, so you should definitely have a look. There might be some, is there a search? Yeah, APOC search, you see there are search-related stuff here, so that can probably work for you. There are also other approaches in the wild, combining Elasticsearch and Neo4j if you also want to look. I mean, feel free to look around APOC. It's probably a good starting point. Graph data science, I'm not sure. That's definitely not my area of expertise. So I'm not sure whether they have... yeah, there are a few sections on algorithms, but I'm not sure those are really relevant to search in general. So APOC is probably the best bet to start with. Again, very easy to install with Neo4j Desktop. It's one click away. So hopefully that answers your question. So thank you, Ravi, from YouTube for asking that. And I'm not going to show any search capability here. So yeah, I'm not going to go into more details about this, but I hope it helped you. If not, we can happily continue on discourse, so community.neo4j.com or neo4j-users.slack.com. And so yeah, so here we are with the test, and I started another test, and we're finally getting to the live coding part, which is mock MVC. I struggled a bit with that part the other day, but actually I think we are close enough. So what's the idea? We have, when we post the JSON contents corresponding to a driver with HTTP transport, I expect to get a 201. So in truth, that's not complete, and we will revise this. Thanks, Ravi, for confirming it. Thank you. And as Ravi, if you have questions, please shoot, and I'm happy to try my best to answer them. And so the test was failing the other day. And why is that? Because if we look, there is a nasty error, but basically is on the server side. So here I'm on the client side in my test, right? I'm sending a request, but my server receives a request, and when it receives a request, it's complaining that it doesn't know how to go from the JSON string, so the payload of my request, to the full thing, so the Neo4j driver. But in turn, if we look, Neo4j driver as driver-supported transport, and driver-supported transport as a driver transport. And if we look at the problem, oops, it was here rather, Jackson is complaining that it doesn't know how to, take that JSON string, the relevant JSON string, and basically create an instance of driver transport. There are several ways to do that. I'm going to pick the easiest. So you might argue it's not clean. My domain is annotated with Spring Data annotations. It's going to be annotated with Jackson annotations, etc., etc. Yes, I know that's not a pure domain, as some people like to say, with all these kind of design approaches. I personally don't really care about it. I just want to develop my feature, and it's going to work. If I want to move away from Spring Data Neo4j 6 anyway, I will have bigger problems to deal with. So that's not, probably a minority opinion here in the design / architecture space, but I don't really care about those. I'm fine annotating my domain directly. So to tell, of course, let me explain a little more the issue. So the issue is, by default, Jackson, like many frameworks, serialization frameworks, try to find an empty no arg constructor. So by default, when you don't define any constructor in Java, you have a default one for you, which doesn't take any arguments. And So frameworks rely on that default one or the one you explicitly create with no arguments. But of course, I want to keep my final entities here. You see, it's completely final. Every field is final. The class, I mean, the class could be extended, etc. I could go further and do that, but I'm not really a big fan of that. So I'm just gonna help Jackson a little bit and tell him, hey, by the way, here is a method. So JSON creator tells Jackson, here is a method or constructor you should use to create an instance from scratch. Because by default, it looks for a no argument constructor, but there is none. And then we need to tell him, oh, and by the way, the parameters here are used for this or this property. So let's do this. And that way, so the JSON structure is just a private matter between the front end and back end, and both are coded by me. I mean, the front end does not exist yet, but the JSON structure is not super important. Of course, you would have to think a bit more carefully if you were to expose a public API. Again, here I'm gonna, I'm taking the easy way out. I'm just annotating my constructor like that. And another question for Ravi. So let me show the question to everyone. Which framework would be easy to implement some web-related tool using Neo4j? Well, that all depends on your own experience, I would say. I mean, you can use all the 5 official languages for the drivers. That's probably the safest bet because you will have the guarantee that those drivers, so for Python, Golang, .NET, JavaScript, and Java, they all have an official driver, so they can connect to Neo4j, and all these languages and many more programming languages have libraries and frameworks for writing web applications. So it really depends on your own experience here. So if you're more experienced with Python, you go with Python. I know there are even some frameworks that integrate with Django and the likes. We've seen in the Ruby world, they have some projects as well. In the JavaScript world, there are a gazillion ways to create a web application, and same in Java, etc. So it really, all of them, I wouldn't say easy because it's very subjective and it depends on what everyone's doing. And in that case here, I'm actually creating one. I'm creating one with Spring Data Neo4j. So I'm starting with the API, but at some point I will have a front end. So some things that front end, a graphical user interface rather, that will show up in the browser with Angular and that will talk to that API. So that's an example of what but because that's a topic I want to address today, but it really depends on your experience. So if you're experienced with Flask, it just happened that we have a tutorial actually, Flask, if you Google Flask and Neo4j, so that's another question from Ravi, let me show it real quick. There is actually a colleague of mine worked recently on how to develop a Flask application with Neo4j. So I will gonna share that. And with a React front end, but you can of course switch the front end to another technology if you want. So I'm gonna share that to everyone. So yeah, there is a Python driver, there is Pythoneo if you want to go even further with OGM capabilities like Spring Data Neo4j in the Java world. So yeah, feel free to have a look there. Hopefully it will help you. And yeah, I don't know why I showed that page, but all right. So I hope it answers your question. You will have some homework to do, I assume, with that new tutorial. But yeah, feel free to follow it step by step, and you will learn how to create a Flask application for Neo4j. And we're planning to add more content in that area as well. So we'll hopefully have a Spring Data Neo4j content as well at some point. So let's try to fix a problem we have at hand, which is Jackson is not happy because I'm giving him, of course, he can serialize it without any problems because he can read the properties. I'm using, a simple object mapper here, so to the Jackson entry point for serializing and deserializing. The most high level, I think, for that. So it's the serialization part works, but then let's see what happens. So I expect the 201 if it works. However, so I can see progress. Maybe you have not seen it because it was very brief, but there is indeed those mock MVC, which is a testing utility for testing HTTP calls with Spring MVC controllers. You can see there is the nice JSON payload here. with all the attributes. And the error is a bit below. So I expected a 201, but I got a 200. So I expected a created response in HTTP terms, and I got an OK response. I'd rather, keep that. So it's quite straightforward with Spring Framework. You just have to add at response status to your method, and it will pick. You give it a code and HTTP status. So in my case, it's created. I cannot type HTTP status dot. Let me try that again. HTTP. Okay, here you go. Created. I don't know what I did wrong, but for some reason it was not picking it up. So let's go back to the test. All right. So cool. So the test works. However, so if you were there last time, it's not exactly what I want to do here. And maybe I can write another test to try to explain that, because the issue I have right now is that it basically considers everything as new. So I give a driver, and it will persist new nodes for everything. So for the driver itself, but also for the supported transport, it will create a separate node and create a new relationship. But I don't want that. If we come back to our beautiful little graph here, oh, I closed it. So let me reopen Neo4j browser. And let me again, so let's pick PHP. I like PHP. I'm not kidding. I really like it. That's how I started my career, by the way. And let's have a look here. Well, just starting with the language, because that's the most obvious thing to do. But if we look, so we have PHP, we have a few drivers here and there. And if we look at the driver side, so for instance, this one, it's, you see, the Bolt v1. There is one node, and if I click on that, you can see many others support Bolt v1, so which was the first version, the first iteration of the Bolt protocol. And that's an issue, right? Because even if I look maybe at another one that supports HTTP, maybe, yeah, because in our test case we have HTTP, you can see that HTTP is there as a single node in the graph. It's not duplicated every time, and the issue, I'm pretty sure it's going to happen. If I do 2 calls, for instance, I will have 2 HTTP nodes, and that's not something I want. So for that, there is no magic. I will have to introduce some service between my controller here and my repository, and I will have first to fetch the transport node, so HTTP or Bolt. If it doesn't exist, create it, and then call my repository to save the driver. So that's something I want to do. So save, of course, might save a new driver, because what's the use case? So in short, what's it's currently not supported is registering a new driver with an existing transport. If the database is empty, of course, it's all fine, because it will create everything in my test case only once. But then if I start adding a new driver with the same HTTP transport, I will end up with duplicated HTTP nodes. That's not something I want. So let's translate what I'm saying now into a test. And maybe this time I'm going to do it. I mean, of course, the rest will be similar, but I'm going to check a few. So persist new driver with existing transport. So let's translate that. So I'm using JUnit 5, by the way, so I could actually use a description. Is that it? Or nope, I don't remember. Or there was something. Or am I using JUnit 5 actually? I'm not even sure. Yeah, with existing transport. And for that, we're gonna do something very simple. So I'm using test container. No, I'm not using test container, my bad. That's gonna be fun. So I'm gonna need something, but let's write in pseudocode. Maybe it won't compile at first, but what I'm gonna do actually is, let me think about this real quick. So I'm mocking the driver repository, and I assume actually I will have a service instead, because as I was telling you, so I'm just going to rename that to service. It doesn't exist yet, but we'll come to it. And let me think about this real quick. I might actually need also the repository, but we'll see. Yeah, you know what? Let's go back to that test, to that new test. I'm gonna first introduce that service, and then once the service is defined, it will be easier to define the final test. So that's the final test. That would be, here is an HTTP node, or in some ways. And so let's start introducing and then use that. So I'm gonna use a driver service. So in terms of Spring Framework, annotations and stereotypes, it's a service. It's probably transactional. We'll see whether that bites me or not, because I'm always have trouble remembering transactional boundaries, etc. But before writing the full implementation, actually, let's start with the test. So what's an easy test? I could go. Let's keep it simple. I've shown you integration tests with the Spring boot testing facilities, but we can also write plain old tests with mocks and stuff. So what do I want to do? I want first, maybe I'm gonna tackle this saves new driver with existing transport again, because that's the same idea. So a new driver service. So in that case, I'm gonna do everything by hand, just to show you a variety of testing approaches. I will probably have, so I think I have Mockito in the class path, yes. I will probably need a repository, but I'm gonna mock it because I'm in a unit test. So that's my driver repository that I'm gonna use here. That gives me my service. Then what I'm gonna do is save some driver. I'm gonna be lazy, I'm gonna pick the same one as here. So yeah, let's get rid of that. And yeah, let's do a full mock thing, just to have some different test approaches in the stream. Sometimes I must admit I can feel a bit lazy and do the integration test because it's easier, there is less mocking, etc. But it's easy for sure, but it's also longer to execute. So if you can, fast tests are better. So I have this save, and I assume that so verify that my driver, so driver repository that will not be driver repository, actually, that will be something that does not exist yet, I believe, which is driver transport repository. I will need both. And that's my driver transport. Actually, in logical order, I need first to check whether the transport is there, and then the driver stuff. So I'm going to put in that order in terms of constructor parameters. Of course, it's thread everywhere, but I don't care. I want to express my intention first, and then I will make sure that it works afterwards, it compiles, etc. So I'm just thinking at the same time, mocking will be annoying. I'm changing my mind in a live stream, I know, again, but yeah, I don't feel like mocks too much. So let's go again with, I guess Data Neo4j test is probably fine. Not sure about that, we'll see. And so in that case, I can probably just do this, and that will be easier. Driver service, I'm not sure whether that's gonna work. Don't remember if data, I think the data layer, the data slice, as we call in terms of application context slices, I'm not sure it includes services. That's something I don't remember. use focuses on only on Neo4j components, with full configuration, Yeah, I'm not sure what Neo4j components mean in that context, but we'll see. If that fails, I can cheat and switch to Spring Boot test. But so yeah, we have a service now. We're happy. We need test containers again. So I'm gonna reuse it not here but here. That's gonna be the same thing. It's gonna start once for the whole class, and then of course I need to clean this up. So I'm gonna copy the same thing, configure everything and make sure the database is emptied every time, at least in terms of data, not so much of constraints, indices, etc. But for now, that's more than enough. So I have my service, my container, my configuration, the cleanup stuff, which of course I need a driver for because I just want to run a Cypher query, which deletes everything. So I also need the driver, which is auto-configured via the auto-configuration bits of Spring Data Neo4j. And the driver is the Bolt driver, the official Java driver for the Bolt protocol for Neo4j. So here I go, it looks good. Then the service, I have it already. So what do I need to do here? That's actually interesting. For that particular test, I want to first insert an HTTP node in the database. So that way, there will already be an HTTP node. Oh my God, I cannot speak anymore. That's great. So it's a transport, the node with a label transport, and it has a value attribute. So that should value property whose name is the actual enum name. So which is a transport type, so HTTP or Bolt. So I believe, so I can actually do something very similar to this, or maybe even use Neo4j template, so that way I'm sure, in terms of transaction, etc., it will behave a bit better. So let's use the template. And for that, so that way I don't have to write Cypher queries. I can just say something like this, so driver transport, and I don't have to, think about the labels, etc., the property names. So let's say I already have HTTP in my database. Then I call, except I removed again bits of things I needed. then I want to save this driver. So let me put it here in my invisible given block. So that's my new driver. My new driver that supports only HTTP. And then, so let's forget about Mockito, etc. So I could save on this new driver, and what I want in turn, in terms of results, is only a single HTTP node. So of course, I want to make sure that template find all of Neo4j driver, a bit similar to before. So I can do that. I can make sure. So my microphone is in the middle of the way. Let me move that. Let me know if the sound is worse now that I moved it, but it should be fine, I think. I hope. So let's do that. Assertions, Find all should have only size 1. And contains exactly, it's actually enough, but contains exactly my driver, my new driver. That should work. And that should probably work, or I can even say, just for the sake, I don't care about the particular instance, but in terms of semantics, I assume a driver with this URI non-official with HTTP works. So that's the first bit, but that's not really new. We've already done that on the repository level, and we now want to check, and that's something new. So if I were to try with a repository, for instance, if instead of doing service.save, I would do repository.save, the test would fail, and we can actually do that right after I'm done with the test. And if I do a template find all, and this time I'm looking for the driver transport. So whether HTTP or Bolt and which versions, I should again have exactly 1 and not 2. That's the thing, because I'm saving a transport here with HTTP, and I want to register a new driver which actually supports HTTP, I don't want to end up with two drivers. Contain exactly, and there is this exactly one, so I don't know what. No, exactly should do the trick, I think. If I remember well, contains exactly checks the size, which I will see at some point. Diff. Yeah, I mean, I need to check the diff, but yeah, okay, maybe just to be safe, because I'm going quick here, I'm just gonna ask size one. Maybe it's redundant. I will have to double check that. It used to be redundant. I'm not sure it's still redundant. So just to be sure, I want one driver, of course. So that's not something new, and one driver, only one transport. So that's something new. So if I instead, let's say temporarily, I inject myself with a repository, the driver repository. All right, driver repository, and I run the test with repository, you will see that, of course, it should fail because it will consider this is a new entity, it's not been tracked, so there is no internal ID or UUID associated with it. So basically, it should say, it should tell, I believe the test should fail. If not, I'm missing something, and and then I will be learning something new soon if the test does succeed, but it should fail because there should be two transports. There should be two HTTP transports, two duplicate nodes. So I should see that hopefully. So the container is starting, takes a while, and boom, I see an error. Hopefully it's an error I'm expecting. Oh, that's the issue I had. Wait a second. What's going on? Code exception while allowing did not match, error creating. Okay, so that's the fear I had initially when using only the data slice. It does not inject services. So that's something I was not sure about. Now I know. So let's first fix that because we will need the service at some point. And let's rerun the test. So the data slices, of course, includes only a repository, which kind of makes sense. I could have guessed it. I mean, I guessed it. I was just not completely sure about it. And let's see. The container starts again. This is application context of Spring Framework boots up. And oh, it passes. That's not great. That's not what I expected. But maybe it's because that's a manual ID. Yeah. Right. So let me try a different approach. Instead, I'm not gonna use the template because it might be cheating. It might be adding some tracking in the Spring Data Neo4j infrastructure. So let me instead do it with a raw Cypher query, and hopefully I will be able to reproduce, to make the test fail and switch to the service and then start implementing the service. So yeah, learning something new, but I guess Neo4j template interacts with the mapping context of Spring Data Neo4j, so that might not have been a great idea. So I'm going to do a write transaction, and in this case, I want to create transport, which is just called transport, I believe. Just called transport, yes. Transport, and the value is called value. Should be HTTP uppercase, and let's get rid of that. The same column. So I believe if I do something like this, hopefully that will make the test fail. I hope so. Let's see. So yeah. So this time I'm completely short-circuiting the Spring Data Neo4j mapping context. I'm using the raw driver, sending queries directly. So the mapping context of Spring Data Neo4j should not know that there is already a node in the graph with the transport, and will basically save another one. So of course, usually you would add a, oh wow, okay. So that's something. Okay, so I'm learning something here. It seems there is some behavior I did not expect related to ID, because the natural key here for transport is just this ID, which is HTTP or bolt. And for some reasons, using, I will chat with my colleagues about that. So maybe I'm trying to solve a problem that does not exist. So that's interesting. I would have thought. So my reasoning was it's a new entity. So there is no ID assigned to it yet because it's not been persisted in the graph. It's a new transport, and in the same way, but then I'm manually assigning this thing, which might be why it's not an issue. So interestingly, yeah, that's interesting. And just to be sure, I'm gonna rewrite the last part just to make sure it's there is nothing that I don't understand. So let's do that. Let's do that and return transport. Let's return a count. Actually, it will be easier. So let me maybe run an assertion on this. So that gives me a result. Sorry. I think it's in no, okay, cool. And result dot single, because there should be only one. No, it's an aggregation, so there will be only one. Get count, and that should be one. I think it will be a long is equal to one. Oh yeah, except I need to map it. Sorry, as long. All right, and that should be more than enough. Or maybe if I wanted to do it the right way, I should instead do this, which gives me the count, and then I can assert that the count is that. That's a bit better. That way, I'm completely independent in both the setup and the final check. Actually, I don't really even care about that because I know it's happening already with the repository, but I just want to be sure that what's in the database. So I'm paranoid. I don't trust Spring Data Neo4j, which is not a nice thing to say. That's not a valid approach, but I just want to be sure I'm understanding that there is no problem, there is no duplicate or anything. So let's see. So container is starting again. And it's okay. So yes, there is indeed then a single transport. So I'm trying to solve a problem that does not exist. And that's why I love TDD, right? Because I could have dived into the implementation, introducing a service for absolutely no valid reasons. That's a good news for me. I don't know for you, but for me, that is a good news. So maybe what I can do instead of having this whole thing, so I'm going to delete this, and I don't need a service. That's perfect. And yeah, so let's try it live then. Let's try it live, and then we'll end the stream there. Because again, I was trying to solve a problem that does not exist. So if I want to start it live, I will have to configure my application to point to something by default. So before I do that, I don't want to overwrite any data in there. I will just gonna create a new one. Local DBMS sounds good to me. Follows freeze later, so that's perfect. A very secure password that you should not use. And let's give it a name. I'm going Neo4j driver admin. Let's create this. While it's being created, I'm going to configure. So there is Spring Neo4j authentication stuff. So I want Neo4j. I want the password, which is a very secure one. So obviously don't do this at home. And then URI will just be a very simple single instance running locally. So it will be, actually it's a default one, so I don't even need it. If I want to be explicit, I could add it, but if I look, I believe, yeah, see, it's showing the default one, which is the right one. So localhost on the default ball port with a single instance. So just, yeah, and yeah, probably the username also has a default value, but you know what, let's keep it like this, okay. So let's run this. Let's have some fun with it. So let's have my terminal on one side and the new database on the other side. And I will have to write a curl by hand. Who doesn't like to suffer a little bit towards the end of the day? I mean, it's end of the day here for me, but maybe not for you. So actually, yeah, I need 2 terminals, and I have 3. One is to start the application. So in that case, I'm using the built-in Spring Boot plugin to start the application. I'm going to open Neo4j browser because I'm going to need it to check whatever is going on. At the beginning, there should be absolutely nothing in there. Yeah, there is nothing, which is quite normal. I just created it. So it's using 8080 on the board, so I need to give it some data. So I might be a bit lazy, a tiny bit. I'm going to cheat. I'm going to cheat because it's... oh, what's going on? Interesting. Error creating driver API. What did I break? No. Oh, yeah. Maybe because I changed... No, wait. Let's read. Let's take time to read the full thing. No qualifying bin of type driver repository available. It's really? Did I break anything here? All right. So why did it work before then? Let me try to figure it out. So we have a driver API test with mock MVC and the mapper. I'm just sending that, and it should pick that up. Interesting. So why does it complain now and not before about not being able to auto-wire driver repository? Well, in that case, I believe a simple mock bin will do the trick. Mock bin driver repository, and I don't really need to customize. I guess that would be enough, hopefully. So at least it will. If it's not enough, there will be another error. A bit okay. Now that's better. So for some reason, either I removed it by accident. Oh yeah, I removed it. That's why. My bad. So it was there. I removed it because I was thinking about the service stuff, but now it's back. Yay! Nothing bad. I'm the best at slowing myself down. And so still, I want. I know it's over the hour already, but I want. I want to use curl and send some JSON and see whether that works as I think it does. So I thought there would be some logs helping me with the JSON using for the test, else it's okay, I will just write it by hand. But there were some mock MVC logs, but not anymore. Okay. Well, for some reason, I will write it by hand then. So data implies post, so I don't have to write post. What kind of data do I want? I want, or maybe I'm going to be, wait. I know what I'm going to do. I'm just going to do something very hacky, which is object mapper dot write value string, and I'm going to get the JSON from that. That's cheating. That's not something I'm going to keep around, but unsupported transport is this. But I really don't want to write the JSON by hand at this hour of the day. Yes, throw any exceptions you want. I don't really care. And let's see. Let's see. Yeah, of course, I'm running the test instead of running the main method. Come on. What? Why is it running the test? Okay, so that's IntelliJ that's actually doing something stupid. Okay, so I'm gonna move that somewhere else, wherever. Yeah, let's put it here, I don't care. Okay, so that's what I wanted, because I'm lazy. I'm lazy, but still it took me some time. So I have this JSON that I'm gonna reuse. I'm gonna get rid of that, bye-bye. See you later. And that's what I'm gonna send. So I have this big JSON here. I'm using it, so the header will be JSON. Not that that really worked. I should, enforce that it's JSON on the way in and out, but yeah, just for the sake of being explicit, I will also add the negotiation. So Ravi is asking, where can we find source code of Neo4j? So that's an interesting question. However, I'm not sure what you're looking for in there because that's a big project. It's on GitHub. So if you go to neo4j/neo4j on github.com, you will find the source code, most of it at least. But again, that's a big project with some very tricky engineering bits. So going by yourself, cloning the repository and looking at all the code will be quite a big task. So it really depends on what you're trying to do here. And finally, let's curl to my backend running on AT-AT and check the results. So I have this example.com driver, which supports HTTP. And yeah, except this slash driver, it's on slash driver, it's not at the root. Yay, okay, so nice. And yeah, some interesting warning. I will have to chat with my colleagues to understand a bit more of that. And so yes, okay, sorry, I misunderstood the no, it's another question, my bad. So hello, Kapil from YouTube. The project is still in a private repo at the moment. I will share it soon on Twitter, so you can see my name if normally right in there, FBIVILLE. I will share it on Twitter soon. Because right now, there is not much yet. So yeah, I'm happy to share it more. So let me do a second curl, maybe with another driver, but with HTTP. Because I still cannot believe there's going to be only a single HTTP node, but for some reason there will be. So first, let me maybe see the graph and the graph view better. We have this transport, HTTP, and we have this driver with some internal UUID actually. So the internal ID of Neo4j, which is 0 because it was the first thing inserted in the database. UUID assigned to the ID property, official false. Okay, so that looks good. That looks good to me. Let's create driver 2, example.com driver 2, still using HTTP. Let's imagine it's official, just for fun. And let's refresh that request and see the new result. Oh, nice. Very nice. Okay, so I was underestimating the capabilities of Spring Data Neo4j. It's actually smart enough because I'm using a natural key here. I'm using the, so if I go back to driver transport, the natural key is the enum. So it will first try to match by ID because it's populated, and if it's there, it will not recreate it. So that's super nice. Less work for me, less code for me, more work done by the framework. And then there is a question of Monica from YouTube. Hello, asking about how to get similarities of two nodes without relationships. So I'm not sure what that means exactly. Similarities in terms of what? In terms of property values, in terms of property keys only, in terms of, so you're excluding relationships, so I guess it's not about the relationships that are attached to them. It really depends what similarity means. So yeah, I would not be able to answer that right now without much more details. So I would advise you again, so let me show the window, maybe show browser. Let me move that. Go to either so slack.neo4jusers.slack.com. And there is a link to go there to ask questions, or our Discourse instance, community.neo4j.com, Monica with more details. And someone, me or someone else, will be happy to answer it. We're monitoring quite carefully. So there are a few topics in there that you can post to. So in your case, it would be probably also a Cypher question. So yeah, feel free to ask a question there. I'm afraid I won't have the answer right now, and because I would need some more context, Monica. So I'd be happy to answer, but let's continue that discussion over Discourse. And okay, maybe just for fun, a last one. So let's call it driver 3, which is not official, and which, boom. Let's say it's bulk this time, and version will be E1. Oh, didn't like it because, both should be uppercase. So yeah, that's something I should probably work on, is make it tolerant to case variations. So the enum is using HTTP in uppercase and both in uppercase, but yeah, that's an improvement, not a super interesting one, but something interesting to do. And here we have both. Okay, so the API is ready with less work than I expected, so I'm glad. Thank you, Spring Data Neo4j 6. Thank you, Gerrit Myers. Thank you, Michael Simons. Thank you, the Spring Data team at VMware, my former employer, for that work with Spring Data Commons and Spring Data Neo4j. That's great. And so I think the next series, not the next series, sorry, the next stream in that series, I will probably start with the front-end part, which will basically be a simple form. So with Angular, we'll see what I can do in 1 hour. So there won't be as much Spring Data Neo4j content in the next stream, I think. But yeah, we'll see how to interact with the backend. So it's just standard front-end development here, not necessarily related to Neo4j, except of course the backend talks to a Neo4j database. But that part won't be as visible as it was as it has been so far. So I've been running over the hour. I'm a bit sorry for that, but I really wanted to get to the end of the API, and we've been able to do it with no duplication of protocols. So I'm super happy about it. If you all want, so please let me know in the comments. If you really want to see the source code of what I have right now on my machine, I'll be happy to open source a repository and share it on Twitter. So follow me on Twitter, FBIVILLE, or monitor my account if you don't want to follow me. That's also fine. Yeah, I will keep in touch and keep you posted with this. So yeah, next week, let's move to the front-end part and start finishing my simple little application. Finishing is a big word. There are actually more things to model in the domain on the Spring Data Neo4j side, but I would like first to go to the front-end part and then move back to the backend to add some more capabilities. So thank you for watching today. Thank you for all your questions. I'm very happy to see them, trying my best to answer. Sometimes it's not easy, it's need more context, but hopefully I'm giving you enough pointers for you to continue your own investigations with Neo4j. Remember, we really want to see you attend and talk at Nodes 2021. So posting this link again here, papercall.io, Nodes 2021. You will have a link to submit your proposals, and we're so happy and excited to have you on board with this. And if you need any help, submitting, because maybe it's a new experience for you, we're more than happy to help you, polish your submission and get hopefully get your talk accepted. Hopefully, of course, we cannot guarantee that, but. So thanks everyone. I think I'm gonna stop here. It's been glad to see you all today, and I will see you next week. So at the same hour. Again, I'm not working in the morning Paris France time anymore, more in the afternoon. So hope this time works for you. And Monica, you have a questions about two. Okay, so I'm just gonna do that last one, and then I will wrap this up. So I'm gonna maybe, yeah, let's see if I keep the screen sharing or not. So let me show the questions, which is you have two CSV files and you want to compare both columns and to know similarities. So similarities in terms, so again, I will need more context, I'm sorry, but if the values are numbers, or if they are strings, or if they are something else, similarity might mean different things. So yeah, I really invite you to go to community.neo4j.com. So let me post the link here. And we'll do our best to answer your problem as long as we have a little more context. So because similar could be different things, right? A string could be similar to another string, doesn't mean they are equal, for instance. So it depends if you mean equality, similarity for values, etc., etc. So yeah, let me just share the link right here, and I will wrap up for today. And let me double check real quick. Community.neo4j.com, as far as I know. Yep, that's the case. Nice. So have a good morning, afternoon, evening, night, all of you. Stay safe in these strange times, and I will see you next week.